Okay, so I guess we'll get started. Because I think we're a little tight on time. So, okay, so my clock is running. So in order to finish just in 20 minutes, I got to get started, and then hopefully people can trickle in, because I still want to leave just a few minutes at the end for questions too. So try to keep it concise. So want to start off with just a kind of a metaphor. So if you go to Los Angeles today, and you go visit the La Brea Tarpits, it's a bit of a tourist attraction, right? You're going to find that there's a fence around the tar, so oblivious people and animals don't accidentally walk in there and get stuck. And that would lead to a bad day. But if you are in Los Angeles in that same region 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, you're not going to have that same sort of protective structure around there. And if you're unaware of your environment, you could wander into that tar and get stuck, right? And lots of animals did that, and that stinks. So the point of this tortured metaphor is that timing is really important. So you could have the right project or be in the right place, but if the timing isn't right, then that's an issue. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Justin, and I started the X Wallet project about 1.5 years ago. The X Wallet is an interface for Monero, for creating Monero transactions on iOS. And I want to give you just a bit of a retrospective here on where that thing came from and what I learned over the last 1.5 years. So one of the first things I learned with the X Wallet is that in Monero, your privacy really depends on uniform transaction creation. So it means that when we create transactions, they need to look like all of the other transactions on the network. If you get somebody who's creating a transaction that is non-standard, then that one sticks out, right? So the same idea with the zebras, with the zeal of zebras. This is how zebra camouflage works. If you have a zebra that's a really weird color, like a purple zebra, then a predator is more likely to get that one. I think that's the idea. So actually, the first idea that I had for the X Wallet in order to make this project self-financing was to send an additional output back to us as the software developers. But the problem is that no one else was doing this in the Monero world. And so people really didn't like that. They got upset about it, and we got rid of it. So self-financing through that mechanism wasn't viable. Then the other kind of important thing is I realized that the App Store was going to be really a good tool for people to perform watering hole attacks. So if it's just two guys and a dog in a garage that are building an app, and you can disrupt this network, just imagine what someone with real resources can do in terms of creating lots of apps and flooding the App Store with these apps. As long as the user doesn't lose their funds, most are just going to be totally oblivious to what's going on in terms of privacy. So there could be all kinds of apps in the App Store for cryptocurrency that do weird things, that have strange backdoors, that might show code on GitLab or on GitHub, but actually the code that's compiled into the binary that's running on the App Store is something radically different. And that's very tricky because in the Apple App Store, the developer doesn't sign the binary, only Apple signs the binary. Another kind of key issue is that we basically got forked off of the network recently. So hard forks are actually really damaging to your ecosystem. So in Monero, one of the ideas is to shake off ASIC manufacturers. And the problem with that, though, is that when you when you make sudden changes in order to shake off one participant in the ecosystem, you unfortunately shake off other participants in the ecosystem. So basically, the result of this is we ended up being about 4 weeks late shipping an update. So our users were sort of stuck for a while. But that wasn't the worst of it. Actually, in the Ledger scenario, someone actually lost money. So Ledger tried to also keep up, and they shipped an update that didn't behave as expected, and people lost some money. So that was a real issue. And then so the kind of real important thing that I learned here is that privacy first means money last. So if you're really trying to build a privacy-focused application, you're really going to have trouble financing that internally. So it's really going to be difficult to build sort of a for-profit or even a non-profit that is self-sustaining. You actually need to get financing from somewhere else. So the conclusion here with the X Wallet after almost 2 years is that it falls short of what I think is the ideal cryptocurrency wallet, but I still think it's a huge improvement over like mobile banking applications and mobile money, and I think it's still a lot better than most cryptocurrency apps out there today, especially in terms of privacy. Okay, so after ZCon 0 last year, I was quite excited. I think a lot of people were quite excited about some of the new practical applications that would be possible due to the efficiency improvements in Zcash. So instead of taking gigabytes to create shielded transactions, you could now do that with just megabytes. And Jack showed that actually being done in a browser. That's super cool. So we were, I think, rightly stoked on that. And so, you know, some of the things that came up were, well, we could actually create a mobile wallet for Zcash now, and there would be some huge benefits to that, right? So you would get stronger privacy against network attacks, like Ian talked about yesterday. He kind of went through some of those different attacks, different models. So the X wallet would be for a decoy-based system, and then the Zcash or the Z wallet would be for Zcash, obviously, so zero knowledge-based system. One of the key criticisms, I think, of Zcash is that you've got these transparent addresses, and so you don't have privacy by default. But of course, if you're creating a wallet, then by default you can define the behavior of those transactions, and so of course we would just make everything shielded. Kind of a cool thing I thought would be that the Zcash Foundation and maybe the Electric Coin Company could actually protect against watering hole attacks by potentially forcing out bad actor apps from the App Store. This is just a hypothesis. I don't know how or if it would actually work, but potentially you could use sort of some legal protections there. And also, you know, users generally want to look for the official wallet. You know, they look for a point of authority to tell them what to do. And so in other systems, like in Bitcoin, you don't have a central authority to tell people what to do. And that can be tricky. But in the Zcash world, we actually do have the foundation and the Electric Coin Company to provide some guidance. And that's a really, I think, positive thing, actually. So I think that could help mitigate watering hole attacks in the App Store. And I think hard forks are a little bit easier to manage in the Zcash world for a lot of reasons. I think the communication flows a little bit more easily, and it takes a little bit longer to get things done, which is a big positive. And then the source of funding would be quite clear as well. So one of the key questions I think people should be asking themselves is, how does this app that I'm using get funded? Like, where does the money come from? It shouldn't just be banks that are asking where your money comes from. Really, it should be, you know, anytime you as a user is using an application, you should be wondering where the money comes from. So the Zcash Foundation would actually finance this application, so it was quite clear. So the conclusion here, the really cool thing is that the Z wallet, in my view, would be closer to the ideal cryptocurrency wallet. So there's just one small catch, of course, and that small catch was you needed this light client library that Jack also mentioned. So the SDK is ready and working nicely for Android, but we're still missing it for iOS. So instead of trying to force something that isn't going to happen, or trying to do something before it's ready, production ready, we decided to close the project and put our tools down. So what are we here for anyway, though? I think an important part of any retrospective is to think about like what you're trying to do in the first place. So I'm not here actually to write software to ship binaries. I'm much more interested in using money as email. I want to use money like sending cash in the mail, but with some guarantees, right? I want to make monetary policy transparent and predictable. And I think it's really important to stop discrimination in the financial system. So what I'm talking about here is like some level of fairness in money. And part of that fairness is equal access to the financial system. So most people today around the world don't have equal access to good money, let's say. In some cases, they have access to very little money or even just barter. And so I think we have the technology now to change that. And then probably kind of the raison d'etre for this conference is we want to make surveillance of anyone not accused of a crime pretty costly. So this is the idea behind a legal warrant. If you suspect someone of wrongdoing, then you actually need to show some reason why you need to inspect them further. And unfortunately, technology hasn't gone in that direction yet. So we want to reverse that direction. That's important. So the ultimate conclusion here is that you need mobile wallets. Like consumers or normal people need mobile wallets. These are necessary for cryptocurrency, but not sufficient for driving adoption, right? So what I learned over the last couple of years working in some bigger organizations and with some bigger organizations and trying to figure out how to drive more adoption of what is called in the industry mobile money. It's that individuals and small teams and startups can't get this done. Unfortunately, I know it's not something any of us here wants to hear, but rather large organizations working together, usually with the blessing of their regulator, that's what drives mobile money adoption. So if you look at things like Alipay, you look at things like WeChat, and I think that's where some of the excitement now comes from with this Facebook coin. I think you start to see the West now catch up with the rest of the world in terms of mobile money adoption. But if you look at how the Facebook coin is rolled out, actually it's a large consortia of large organizations, and then they can work closely with regulators to kind of smooth the rough edges. So in my case, I was looking at getting banks and telcos working together. But unfortunately, this is pretty tricky to accomplish. So the question for me then is, well, what really comes next? So how do you kind of move this ecosystem forward? So I think for the Zcash folks working on the Zcash protocol, the direction is pretty clear, and I think it's really positive. I think the approach of bringing on a parity implementation is really a good one. I think that sort of improving the promise of the system, the security promise of the system is super important. And so here's why. So my new project is actually called Cybex, and this is a product for professional traders, and it helps them to trade digital assets without counterparty risk. It also gives them some other benefits like real-time settlement. Privacy is actually quite important to professional traders, OTC traders especially. It helps them maintain custody if they want to do that, or control custody, and it prevents common things like front running. So this is a fairly new project. But we've been working on it quite hard now for some time, and we'll be doing a launch of the alpha in September. So I'm really trying to keep this one short, but actually, after talking to a bunch of you guys yesterday, I wanted to add this slide kind of as an extra because I thought it was important to kind of get this out there. So these are some key topics I think that we need to keep in mind. The way the Cybex actually works is through hash time lock contracts. So it's really important that the crypto assets that we are able to support do support HTLCs. And so Zcash, of course, is a great candidate for that. I would love to see, the ability to do HTLCs with shielded transactions. That'd be fantastic. And then, as we kind of continue, we'll want to add more crypto asset technologies. We will start with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then hopefully in version 0.2 we'll add Zcash. But then the other crypto assets that we add, they need to have a very strong security promise. So like Zcash has done, you need to see things that have multiple implementations. Really from a business perspective, you want to build on things that don't change very often. So these two kind of last points are related, I think. I really like technologies like Bitcoin where if it does hard fork, it's like molasses in wintertime. It moves really, really slow. There's a lot of advance warning, and we can anticipate what's about to happen. And the same is true with this very last comment here, ossify the API. I thought that was nice because it rhymed. But if we can have an API that really doesn't change, then this really makes life easy, right? This makes life easy on us as developers, and it makes the product more secure for our end users, right? So they have a higher probability that the application behaves as they expect it to behave. So thank you guys. I'll wrap up now, and if you have any questions, I think we've got maybe 5 to 6 minutes for questions. Thanks.
Hi. On the mobile wallet security issue, I'm concerned that, there's the watering hole attack. There's also the good developer gone bad, or developers that don't manage their code signing keys properly, or everything else. I think this is a big problem for a lot of industry. Do you have any other solutions to that you've been looking at? Or?
So this is also part of why I use the metaphor of tar pit, right? So mobile wallets, when it comes to privacy, mobile wallets really are a tar pit. It's really, really, really hard to make any sort of privacy promise in a mobile wallet environment because you're dependent on so many different layers of the stack. So you've got the hardware issues where the chip is maybe backdoored. Then you have the software vendor issue. You have Apple to deal with. Ultimately, you have to trust Apple. Because they're the ones who are actually signing your binary. So they don't let the developer add a signature to the binary, only Apple signs the binary. And so you can never really guarantee that your application is running. Even if you're an honest developer, an ethical developer, you can never really guarantee the end user that the application is secure. And the really kind of insidious thing in this whole tar pit issue is that it doesn't necessarily relate to loss of funds. So I think most people only look at this concept of, will I lose my money if I use this application? No, actually your data as a user, what you're doing with that privacy-focused cryptocurrency is much, much more interesting than the amount of money that you have on there, right? That's much more valuable. So, and that's something that, you can exfiltrate that data in so many ways. I think one of the best ways to hide a backdoor where you're moving a lot of user data is to embed something like an exchange into your application. Any other questions? we're on track actually, which is
Hello,
great.
thanks.
Time.
Yeah, so I thought I almost heard you suggest that pure wallets don't drive adoption, but it seems like you're saying trading apps or exchange integrations might drive adoption, and they can provide mobile wallet functionality. Is that sort of where you see the most promising consumer adoption is right now?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So, how do you drive consumer adoption? I think is the question ultimately. I think that you really have to be a Facebook in order to drive consumer adoption. I think that for cryptocurrencies, for all of us here, in order to get our values and our product out to people, you have to package that in a way that is, or you have to package it such that people really find the benefits compelling. So you have to find someone that has a real problem in the first place, a real pain point, and then you have to figure out how you can package this technology in a way that sufficiently addresses that pain point. So for me, one of my kind of key discoveries was that by launching a mobile wallet and promoting it, we can invest quite a bit of time and energy. It requires a lot of time and energy, for us anyway, not maybe for a government or someone with unlimited resources. But the issue is that we can only ever really get 10,000 users, 100,000 users, 10,000 users. And that's really not enough, right? We need 100 million users. And so how do you drive 100 million users? I think you have to do it from the top down. And I think what we've seen in Bitcoin as well is what drives Bitcoin and interest in Bitcoin and adoption of Bitcoin is not consumers per se. It is small investors that have, or individual investors that have given it its initial value proposition. But Bitcoin is a capital asset. It's a capital good. And I think the way people behave with Bitcoin, the way people use Bitcoin, it's not in a retail or a merchant type of context. It really is sort of quite smart people who are using this thing as a better money. They're using it to trade, and they're using it to make themselves wealthier. And so I also believe that this is the path forward for things like Zcash, because I think individually people are not so driven to appreciate the benefits that you have to offer. But I think that institutions that have really smart people inside them that have really difficult problems to solve, like transactions from bank A to bank B and country A to country B, and you really don't want Eve in country E to see what's going on. I think that's a great use case for Zcash or for Zcash. And I think that in that context, you can convince people that there is a serious pain point there to be solved. This selective confidentiality that is possible, this is really, really desirable. It just hasn't been communicated yet in effect.